Hey, this is TJ Wilson, aka Tyson Kidd, and you're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast, established 2019, direct from the North Wales coast. His verbal skills definitely outweigh his wrestling ability. It's time for British wrestling's sharpshooter, your host, Stu Palmer!
A warm welcome to episode 44 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, and what a treat I've got for you this week. We are heading back to the US of A, and it's none other than former WWF, WWE talent, alumni, Duke The Dumpster Droese, and by his real name, Mike Droese. And what a pleasure it was to get Mike on for an honest and frank conversation about his career, how he got into wrestling. He started wrestling very, very young and went on to do very, very well in WWF. He talks about Vince McMahon. He talks about wrestling Triple H. He talks about modern wrestling, what his thoughts are on that. Mike had some addiction issues over the years, but he is now helping people in recovery. That's what he does as his day job, and I'm sure it's been very rewarding for him, and you'll hear all about that as well. So we don't just touch upon wrestling this week, it's about him helping people. He uses his experiences to help others now. So here we go, episode 44, Mike Droese, aka Duke The Dumpster Droese. Enjoy. My guest this afternoon, where he is none other than Mike Droese, and we knew him as Duke The Dumpster Droese back in the 90s in WWF, WWE. How's it going, Mike?
It's going great, Stewie. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming on, man. Honestly, it's humbling for me when you guys come on. Guys from my childhood that I love watching, you know, full circle.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
How's lockdown been, Mike? That's my first question all the time at the moment.
It wasn't so bad here. You know, they're getting back to normal slowly but surely. Here in Tennessee, things weren't so bad. So, you know, I work for a government program now, so our building is still shut down, but it's even going to be opening up in the next week or so, you know, with restrictions, of course. But things are pretty much getting back to normal slowly but surely here. So, you know, I think people are taking the necessary precautions, and hopefully we'll get through this thing and get back to some semblance of normal soon, hopefully, you know.
That's cool, man. Right, into wrestling now.
Right.
When did you begin watching pro wrestling when you were younger?
When I was a kid, man, I want to say elementary, definitely junior high school, like 7th to 8th grade, like middle school age. I grew up in Florida. I watched championship wrestling from Florida. I grew up on that run by Eddie Graham. It had the likes of Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan, Blackjack Mulligan. Later on, Lex Luger came through. Rick Rude came through there. We were just talking about Barry Horowitz. He was there for quite a while. There was a lot of great wrestlers that came through there, and that's where I started watching wrestling.
That's cool. My next one to go off from that is, which guys, I know you've obviously stated some of the guys, which guys did you gravitate to? Who did you enjoy watching?
Well, I always enjoyed, you know, Dusty Rhodes was always entertaining when I was a kid growing up. But I have to say, when I was coming up in the business later on, when I was in high school, I started to learn how to become a professional wrestler. I went to a school. But during those years, I was watching the Road Warriors and Ric Flair. Those were the people that I grew up idolizing, or came up idolizing in the business, that I tried to emulate and copy as much as I could. I was a huge fan of the Road Warriors. And Ric Flair was just such an amazing interview and such an amazing wrestler. I remember, actually, when I was still really young, I went and did a TV taping for the NWA Championship Wrestling from Florida in Tampa, and I was like 18 years old. And I watched Ric Flair work with enhancement wrestlers, and he was the world champion. And he was giving these guys all kinds of stuff in the ring. He made it a good match. And that always amazed me because everybody else just chewed up, their job guys, so to speak, the enhancement wrestlers. They would just chew them up and spit them out and beat them real fast. Ric Flair always made a point to make it a match before he went over because he was smart. That meant that it meant something then. So that was one of the things that always impressed me about Ric Flair. Now later on he got kind of weird, but 1980s Ric Flair and the Road Warriors were my idols.
What was it about the Road Warriors? Was it just the Smash Mouth style that they had?
A lot of it was the Smash Mouth style. I stole a lot of I was a power move guy. I was a brawler, and I took a lot of that stuff from them. I took Road Warrior Animals Power Slam, the clotheslines and stuff that they do, all that kind of stuff I took from the Road Warriors. But for me, it was just during that time, it was a very special time for the Road Warriors before they became the LOD in WWF. When they were down in the NWA, WCW, again in the 80s, mid to late 80s, when the Road Warriors would come to town and they would come out through those curtains, that was a feeling like no other. It was an amazing thing. That's why somebody down the road came up with the term a Road Warrior pop. Like when the crowd really goes nuts, they said that was almost a Road Warrior pop because the Road Warriors had such a huge pop. The fans were so crazy for them. And a lot of that time they were wrestling as heels. But there was such an energy when they came out, and it was just amazing. That was what I wanted. I wanted that amazing feeling that I was feeling when I was watching them. I wanted to be able to give that to people. And that's why I really idolized them.
I was going to ask, did any events stand out for you before you went into the business and trained yourself? Did any events stand out? NWA?
Well, I can tell you the one that made me want to, without a doubt, want to become a professional wrestler was WrestleMania 1 with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. The tag match, they had Cyndi Lauper there and all that. It was just this event. It was totally different than anything anyone had ever seen. And I remember my dad took me to see it at a local, we had an arena, the Miami Beach Convention Center was the arena. And you went there and watched it on a big screen TV via closed circuit television because there was no pay-per-view back then. It was just closed circuit television. That's how you watched this stuff. And we went to an arena and watched it on TV, basically. And I just remember during that match and the hype up for that match with Hulk Hogan, and during that match, the way they laid it out, at one point, I literally stood up and turned to my dad and I said, that right there is what I want to be. I want to be a wrestler. And that's when it started.
That's cool, man. Right. Natural progression on questions now. It's got to be, when did you begin training?
I was still in high school. I was a high school wrestler in Miami, Florida. And my senior year in high school, my last year, we had a fundraiser for the wrestling team where we brought in the wrestlers from Championship Wrestling from Florida. So like Dusty Rhodes, Barry Windham, Lex Luger, they all came to my school and did a show in the gym. And the guys like myself that were on the high school wrestling team, we got to walk them to the ring. We did security. And my dad was hanging around in the locker room just kind of meeting them because I was too scared to ask anybody. But my dad asked them where a school was locally down in Florida. And a guy named Tyree Pride told us of a school that was being run by his tag team partner, a guy named the Jamaican Jammer Bobby Wales. And that's where I went to learn. It was just basically an old dusty ring and an old dusty warehouse. There was nothing cool. There was no, nothing else there. It was just a ring. And we would show up several times a week and train and learn. Another guy that went through the school with me at that time was Norman Smiley. He used to wrestle as Black Magic. He was wrestling. He was coming up at the same time through that school and doing local shows as well through that wrestling school. So it was an interesting time, and it was fun, and it was a great – it was an easy transition for me coming out of high school wrestling because I was in great shape. I could do anything. I could move, and I learned pretty fast. And I would say I probably had my first match after about 6 months but I was still high school age. I had just come out of high school and I was learning to be a professional wrestler.
That's cool, man. It was like early. Like I assumed it'd be like you being your early 20s doing it. So that's cool. How did you come up with your first gimmick in the business? Obviously, you said 6 months. Your first match. How did you come up with it initially?
Well, it's funny. My very first match, my very first gimmick, Bobby Wales, the guy that trained me, called me Mean Mike Casey. And the reason he called me that is because obviously my real first name is Mike. But I used to wear this shirt from my high school every time at practice. And my high school was the Killian Cougars, KC. And so I had a KC on my shirt. So he just took that and he said, "You're going to be Mean Mike Casey." And that was my very first gimmick. My second gimmick, shortly thereafter, we went and did a tour in the Bahamas. This is right around the same time. And Tyree Pride and Bobby Wales and all these guys ran it. And I wrestled as the surfer. I remember I'm still like 19. I wrestled as the surfer boy, Harry Race, the nephew of Harley Race. And that was a very short-lived gimmick as well. But later on, when I was wrestling in Florida in the independents and kind of finding my way, I started to really think. And I was also going to college at the University of Miami, and I was in a fraternity. And a lot of my drunk fraternity brothers used to come up with really cool names. And one of the names they came up with was Rocco Gibraltar. And I really thought that was a cool name. And I took that name one day, and I was just sitting there in my room, and I was thinking, okay, I got to come up with a character that will work in the WWF. And eventually I came up with the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar. And that's who I started wrestling as in Florida. I was the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar. I started immediately taping every match I had so I could put together footage and create a promotional package and do everything I needed to do. And that's how it came about. I started off as the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar, and later they just changed the name to Duke the Dumpster so they could, own it for licensing purposes.
You know what? I only obviously did a bit of research. I didn't realise that you went as the Garbage Man prior to WWF until I obviously did some research. So there we go.
Yeah, and Vince really liked it. Obviously, I went up to him with a promotional package and handed it to him with a tape and pictures, and I had the whole thing was set up and all based around that Garbage Man character, and he just latched right onto it. It was perfect for what he wanted. He envisioned it like a cross between Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Hillbilly Jim, a big working class baby face. And that's what it was while I was there. That's kind of what we did. That was the direction we worked in. And when it was cool, it was good while it lasted.
I read up also you placed in PWI and you were placed at 500. You got in the 500 being the 500th man. Now, the fans, when you got to WWF, this is me researching this. Obviously, I was young at the time. Done my research. The fans in WWF would chant 500 at you, apparently.
No, that was actually just a story put forward by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. They said they were chanting. They were not chanting 500.
Right, okay.
But I will say this. It was what happened was it all just kind of happened coincidentally at the same time. I was wrestling down in Florida for the Sunshine Wrestling Federation, and one of the guys down there was friends with Bill Apter. And I guess somehow they found out about me wrestling down in Florida as the Garbage Man. And, each year it was obviously very important who number one was going to be, but it was also this whole process of them choosing who the number 500 was going to be, because it was considered like almost like a very coveted spot. And this friend of mine came up to me and said, they are interested in making you number 500. I didn't even really think about it. I said, yeah, that's cool, whatever. And sure enough, I was on that list. I was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated number 500 out of the top 500. And shortly thereafter, I went up to Vince and did what I did and got a tryout. But Pro Wrestling Illustrated didn't have anything to do with that. They wanted to think they did, and they wrote a story that they did. But no, that was all my doing, and which I let them take credit. I don't care. That's fine. But it was just interesting how it all came together at the same time. But it was basically a coincidence.
Obviously, we'll go into WWF a bit now. We'll extend on it. Which guys did you enjoy working with there in WWF? Which guys was it a pleasure getting in there with who you hadn't faced on the independents?
Triple H was definitely always a pleasure to work with because I had a decent run with him, and we wrestled in a lot of matches. I didn't like the Click at a certain time. I didn't like the Click much. But I've always said I tried to get along with everybody. But I have to say, Triple H was always a consummate professional. He was always willing to try anything. I mean, I slammed him all over the place, and he took it every night like a trooper. He did not complain, never, not once did he ever complain. He was always willing to do stuff that make the match better, and I always had to respect him for that. Now, guys that I used to wrestle like in house shows, Savio Vega, especially when he was Quang, Henry Godwin, the Hog Farmer, PCO, who back then was Quebecer Pierre, or Jean-Pierre Lafitte, and the few occasions I had to wrestle Stone Cold Steve Austin. All of those guys were freaking hilarious. And Owen Hart, I didn't wrestle him much, but in battle royals and stuff. But these people were all hilarious in the ring and fun. They always made it fun. We always had a laugh, and I have to say I enjoyed working with all those guys.
Mike, looking back, just going back to Triple H, could you have foreseen how successful Triple H was going to be further down the line? Could you tell that he was going to be a huge star in the company, looking back?
I could tell he was good in the ring. He was a good wrestler. I could tell that he loved the business. If nothing else, the Click members used to always sit around talking about the wrestling business. And I have to hand it to them. They were in love with the wrestling business, which you have to be. Another thing about Triple H is he never, ever did any drugs or alcohol, ever. And I think it's still that way to this day. And that may not seem like a huge thing, but I'm sure that was an important factor with Vince McMahon early on when Triple H started moving into more of a creative role. He knew that he could trust him not to, go running off the deep end and doing drugs and stuff, because that was not Triple H's thing. He didn't do drugs or any of that stuff. So in those respects, I think he had everything, all the things that it would take to move along in this business and be successful. But I never knew he would go to the level that he is now, being on the cusp of perhaps taking over the whole company. And that's great for him, man. He's worked very hard to get there. A lot of people don't like him, but there's a lot of jealous people in this business. When somebody's doing well, there's always going to be people that hate him. And I was one that hated him in the Click early on, and I since learned that a lot of that was my issue. So, yeah, there's a lot of haters out there, but I never see Paul getting as big as he was or has and doing those things that he has done, but he definitely had it early on. So
that's good. Nice answer. Nice answer that. During your time in the company, this is going to be another one I wanted to ask. Was there any talent within the company who you felt didn't get to where they should have got to? Someone who could have made it to the top but didn't get it, if you could think off the top of your head.
There's always guys that, it's an interesting thing in the wrestling business, especially up there for Vince McMahon. He gives people opportunities, and sometimes if one little thing doesn't go right, it completely turns Vince off to that person. And then they'll never have another chance, or they'd be very lucky if they ever got another chance. Guys like that would be Adam Bomb. I mean, he was a monster, and I don't know, it seemed like they could have done so much more with him. Lex Luger and the whole Lex Express thing, and them just pulling the plug on that. He wasn't necessarily the most charismatic guy, but they could have worked around that and made him a bigger star than he ended up being. But instead, they just kind of pulled the plug. Let me think. Savio Vega, when he was Quang or Savio or whatever, he was always a great worker. And he got some pretty good pushes, but he could have been a main guy, I think. But yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah,
it's just interesting that they pull the plug pretty quick if they see something they don't like, or if certain people don't like you, you don't get another chance.
Now, Bret Hart to this day is still my favourite of all time. From when I was a kid, met the man. I've met the man. Couldn't string a sentence together when I met him, Mike. I was with my dad. My dad came to WrestleMania that year, and he's shaking Bret's hand, and I just couldn't keep my composure. I don't know why. Anyway, sorry, I'm making a big thing out of this. How was Bret? Because I love Bret still to this day.
Here's the thing about Bret. I rode with Bret quite a bit, as a matter of fact. At one point, I asked him to help me and advise me. And he did in certain situations and circumstances. He gave me advice and things of that nature. But I also think you got to remember he comes from the same bloodline as Owen Hart. And I think there were times when Bret Hart was winding me up and maybe not giving me the best advice. I mean, I don't think he was trying to sabotage my career or anything, but I think he was having fun at my expense sometimes. But yeah, it was always interesting riding with him and listening to things that he had to say about the business and stuff like that. Great wrestler, amazing wrestler. And the way he thinks and the way he puts together matches, it was just always interesting to sit there and listen to him talk about that stuff. So yeah, he was a great wrestler.
I was at Wembley Stadium for SummerSlam '92, man.
Wow.
Dad took me. I was only 6, but obviously I remember bits of it. And I still watch that match to this day, Mike. Timeless.
Yeah, that was an amazing match. That I think took his career to a new height, for sure. I mean, he was already at a good spot, but that, and there was plenty of other matches he did the same thing where it was just amazing. And that match with him and Davey, that was one of those very special moments in the wrestling history.
Just to go back to you, because obviously the episode's about you. I've read, obviously, on your Facebook, you were saying about, were they trying you out for commentary?
Yeah, there was one point where they did. You know, I was always such a goof in the locker room trying to make people laugh that I think at one point the Click, well, first of all, Jerry the King Lawler had left the commentary position for some reason, briefly, and somewhere in maybe late '95 or something like that. And I think Vince he wanted to use Shawn Michaels, but Shawn didn't want to be a commentator. Shawn wanted to be a wrestler. He wanted to be the champion. So Shawn did 1 or 2 shows of Raw, and then he wasn't going to do it anymore. So Vince had to find somebody else. I think at one point they even tried Bastion Booger on Live Raw, and it didn't work out too well. And what they did is they flew me into the studio for a tryout, and they didn't tell me what was going on until I got there. And when I got there, they said I was trying out for a commentary position. And when I walked in the door, to my surprise, I was trying out sitting right next to Vince McMahon, calling a match at the studio of Monday Night Raw. So no pressure there. But I was just not really prepared like I should have been. I didn't understand a whole lot about announcing at the time. I thought I was just sitting there calling the match. Well, no, there's a straight commentator and there's a color commentator. And Vince was the straight commentator who calls the action. I was supposed to be color. I was supposed to be, you know, the Gorilla Monsoon or the Jesse the Body Ventura. And I didn't understand that full well. So it started off not so good. And it was one of those situations where when you get an opportunity and it doesn't go well at first, Vince is totally turned off to it, and he was just totally turned off to it then, and it just didn't happen. So yeah, just one of those opportunities lost, but you know, it is what it is.
It's that age-old question that we all ponder: is wrestling fixed? This is Bill Apter, and my answer to that is I didn't know it was broken. So many of you know me from my days back at the classic wrestling magazines, and a lot of you from OneWrestling.com and OneWrestlingVideo.com. But I always get questions about various things I did through the years to propel my career to where it is today as the world's most recognizable journalist in pro wrestling. What was my relationship with the McMahons? Was I the guy who started that feud between the actor, comedian Andy Kaufman and Jerry the King Lawler? What is Ric Flair really like? Who are my favorites? Well, all this and more answered in my book that you can get online or at your favorite book dealer called Is Wrestling Fixed? I Didn't Know It Was Broken. It's a great read, got great views, and hopefully you'll be picking it up soon too. So the answer to Is Wrestling Fixed? You know it now. I Didn't Know It Was Broken. This is Bill Apter, and I'll see you at the matches.
GTG, often imitated but never duplicated. Kind of broad at the shoulder, narrow at the hip. No other promotion give us any lip. We the best of the best, the beasts of the East. SOS, simply out of sight. GTG.
What he said, good times guaranteed.
Vince gave you your release, didn't he? Am I right with that? Asking you that.
They sent me home. Jerry Briscoe. It was after WrestleMania 12, and I was just into a new contract, a 1-year rollover, and I had about 8 or 9 months left on it. And Briscoe came up and told me that Vince said I could go home because I had just been so disgusted with everything. And I went home and sat on that contract and didn't get paid for the rest of the 8 or 9 months. They didn't release me. I just sat there and finished it. I didn't want to make a big deal about it because, again, maybe I was hoping of going back someday. But that's kind of how I left. I had complained to the point where I told Vince if he wasn't going to use me any better than he was, he could just send me home. And he talked about sending me to Memphis and letting me wrestle there, and he would pay me, which I agreed to. And then I told him to put it in writing. And I don't think that was a good idea because then he was just turned off to it. And then shortly thereafter, he sent Jerry Briscoe up to tell me to go home. So that was the end of it.
How was Vince with you during your tenure with WWF?
Vince is a shrewd businessman. Vince is a promoter, and you got to understand that. Vince will make promises that he will not keep because he will go in fully intending to keep the promise, but then certain things change. The conditions change for the matches or the angles or the feuds, and he has to make changes on the fly, and sometimes that cuts people out of something they were promised. That's why so many people have dislike for Vince McMahon. But if you think about it, he's just being a wrestling promoter. That's what they have to do. Sometimes they got to cut situations out. And, if you can't handle that, you can't be in the wrestling business. You have to be able to handle being let down. It's like any part of the entertainment industry. There's going to be instances where you're going to be let down. Rejection. You got to be able to handle rejection, or you're not going to make it in the wrestling business. And at the time, I was ill prepared for it.
Obviously, off the back of leaving WWF, you went on to wrestle independently, didn't you? Again.
Yeah, I went back to the company I was working for in Florida and wrestled some with them, the Sunshine Wrestling Federation. But by that time, they had changed their name to Florida Championship Wrestling, FCW, before it ever became a developmental territory for Vince McMahon. It was run down there by a couple of guys in South Florida. And I worked for them for a little while, but it didn't last too long. I ended up leaving there before too long.
Now, I remember this fondly because I recorded WrestleMania 17. Just to fast forward a little bit, Mike, and you came back for the Gimmick Battle Royal in Texas. How was that? How was it going back to do that?
I mean, it was great to go back and be in a WrestleMania because I had not been in one before that. I was working for that company in Florida at the time, and somebody came up and told me that they were going to do this gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania, that I need to call Bruce Pritchard. So I called Bruce, and he got me in the match, and it was interesting. All the old timers and the old gimmicks and stuff like that. 65,000 people in the Astrodome, amazing. Being able to stand there and watch live, specifically the Benoit versus Kurt Angle match and the Stone Cold versus The Rock match. Those two matches were unbelievable. And I knew it was a special WrestleMania, that's for sure. But it was just cool. It was cool to be back there and see everybody.
Still considered the best one, isn't it? Like among fans.
I think it is. I believe it is.
As a whole, obviously, you can go back to WrestleMania 3, I think, but it didn't have match after match, did it? But
yeah, no, it didn't. I mean, it had the big one with Andre and Hogan, but
Savage.
17 was just from top to bottom an amazing WrestleMania.
Cool, man, cool. Just going into the present, Mike, do you watch much wrestling now?
I do not watch much current wrestling. Basically, what I'll do is if I see people talking about a match or something that seems interesting, I'll go watch it on YouTube or catch, like a replay of it somewhere. But no, I don't watch a whole lot. It's funny. I answered a question on Facebook today. The general question for everybody was, "What year did you stop watching pro wrestling?" And my answer was, I stopped watching pro wrestling the year that Triple H climbed in a casket and had sex with a dead body. That was the moment I literally remember. I said, I'm not watching this anymore. And after that point, it was just a situation. And people often ask me why I don't watch wrestling. The real reason, though, is it's simple. They just keep doing the same storylines over and over and over. They just plug in new names. But basically, the angles and the stories are the same. I mean, they must have a book, and they just go in randomly and pick a storyline and use it on the next two guys coming up, because that's what wrestling is. They just rehash old storylines. And, it's really not that exciting to watch. Now, sometimes they'll bring back somebody that was a friend or is a friend of mine, and I'll watch and see what's going on. But I don't have the network, and I don't even have TV, actually. I just have internet access here at home. So I really don't watch much of anything.
Oh, I don't know. The next one was like, I was going to say, which guys do you feel are destined for greatness in the current product? Obviously, you said you've watched bits and pieces on YouTube. Who would you say, if you off the top of your head, maybe?
You know who should have been destined for greatness? And I've always said this, and I've never met the guy, but I've seen him work. Ziggler, Dolph Ziggler. Man, that dude, I always say he's a modern-day Kurt Hennig. But for whatever reasons, he's been held down, to mid-card status or whatever for most of his tenure in the WWE. And I think he's just riding out the paycheck at this point. But he is a great wrestler. There's just a difference. Obviously a lot of what they do now, I call it script working, because everybody's on a script, whether it's in the match or in a promo, it's a script. But you can tell that Ziggler has the ability to go out and wrestle a match and manipulate the crowd like people used to do. He's not just getting through spot A to spot B to spot C like the script says. He tells a story. He has psychology, for lack of a better term. He manipulates the crowd. He takes the crowd where he wants them to go, and they follow. Those kind of guys are a dying breed in this business. You don't see many people that can call a match on the fly and work like that. I think Ziggler's one of those.
I'll tell you what, me again, this is, but I'm going to tell you, when he cashed in Money in the Bank, we were at WrestleMania, and I was in the arena. I've not heard a pop like it since when I've seen Austin come out. When he cashed in that briefcase, and obviously Alberto Del Rio kicked out the first time, I thought he's not gonna get it, and then he got him. He got him, but I've not heard.
And then they didn't do anything with it.
I've not heard a pop like it, Mike. And we've had CM Punk who got a big pop, but like you say, bit of a waste with Ziggler, I think, as well.
And you see that happening more and more, which is another thing I think that frustrates fans, and it's another reason I really don't watch much. Is at some point down the road in the early 2000s, Vince McMahon decided he wasn't going to push single superstars anymore. He was going to push the brand, WWE. And that was a major change, because now that makes everybody expendable no matter where they are on the card or how much money he has put into developing them. He can pull the plug at any time. And they often do, unfortunately, pull the plug on guys when they really shouldn't. I think that's a lot of what's going on. It's all about the brand now and not developing specific superstars like it used to be. I think Stone Cold and The Rock were the last two that they really pushed as superstars. And I think when Austin went home that time, not wanting to lose to Brock Lesnar, I think that was probably in large part the catalyst to make Vince decide, okay, we're going to change something. Because, he'd been held up by the Ultimate Warrior a couple times. He was held up once by Jeff Jarrett and other guys in different situations. And he was just tired of that happening. So he wanted to kind of be in control and always have the ability to just plug somebody else in. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. And it's like cookie cutter wrestling. And I think that's what has a lot of fans frustrated.
A lot of you guys, obviously, fan standpoint doesn't really matter in this respect. The question I was going to ask, as a wrestler, and the wrestlers I've had on, they're saying nobody sells in modern wrestling. What do you think?
Man, everybody kicks out of each other's finishes 4 or 5 or 6 times. That's part of their storytelling process, and it's just doesn't make sense. I remember when I was there, we're talking the early to mid 90s, and you had road agents in the back like Tony Gurria and Chief Jay Strongbow and George Animal Steel. And I would just remember guys like Tony Gurria would say, and this is when guys started doing moonsaults and everything else off the top rope and the splashes. And Tony Gurria goes, whatever happened to when a drop kick was a finish? And it's like, that makes a lot of sense. Whatever happened? And now it has just evolved even worse and gotten to the point where people are throwing everything but the kitchen sink and everybody's kicking out of everything just to get that cheap little pop of, oh, he kicked out, over and over and over again. And you wear out the fans on that. You start to wear them out and they get tired of it. And that's what you're seeing a lot of, is they're just kind of getting tired. It's the moves don't mean anything anymore. They're not using them to tell a story. They're just, like I said before, getting through a match, spot A, spot B, spot C, and get it over with and get it done, and hopefully you get a pop.
Do you think it'll change where they'll look at how it was done years ago? Because, what's old's new again. Do you think they'll get past this and look at the old school ideals, how you did it, how you put a match together? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't think Vince is going to change it. I think Triple H and what he's doing in NXT is they're trying to have that type of wrestling somewhat. They're trying to change it back a little bit to the old format style with NXT, but I don't think Vince will ever let that. Vince never respected the old school Southern style wrestling. I got dogs barking. Sorry about that. The mailman's here. Anyway, you'll never see that again. I think Triple H is trying with NXT, but Vince won't let that happen.
I know you don't watch much of it. Have you seen any bits on the internet, AEW? That was my next one.
Yeah, I see a lot of things that Chris Jericho does, and a lot of the promos, and a lot of the guys that are wrestling. You see a lot of stuff with that Orange Cassidy that people either love or hate. Different situations. Cody Rhodes and what he's doing, of course. I think that's an interesting take on the wrestling business, the way they're doing things. Mm-hmm. Equally trying to give everybody an opportunity to get over, and putting everybody in positions where they can raise their stock and look better. And I think that's important. You're not at the mercy of writers so much or backstage politics, I think, in AEW like it is in WWE.
I'm a big fan of Hangman Adam Page, Mike. I think that.
Yeah, I know who he is. I haven't really watched him much, but I've seen some bits and pieces. But I've heard about him, and yeah,
Ring of
they've
Honor.
got a lot of good things.
Sorry, Ring of Honor. Many a time, I know it's not always about having the title, but they put him in the TV title picture loads of times and never got it. So I'm kind of glad he's had some gold.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got dogs barking here.
Yeah, it's all right, Mike.
But I agree with you. And, of course, I love more than anything watching Jim Cornette's responses to all of these federations. He about blows a gasket every time somebody has a dick match or a whatever other kind of match. That's one thing I do listen to is Jim Cornette's podcasts.
Brilliant.
Listen to him go off on the current state of the business.
Yeah.
That is always very enjoyable. Okay, I'm good.
All right, man. He's got the thing with Cornette. You either love him or you hate him. I like him. I respect where he's come from, but it's modern wrestling, and he's right. He can have an opinion like everybody else. That's how I look at Cornette.
Yeah, and that's the same way I look at him. And it's he says some things that are right. He says a lot of things that are wrong. It's just entertaining. A lot of the things he says are very just entertaining to me. The way that he talks about, to people in this business to piss him off or what the state of the business or what people are doing to it. I don't take things so seriously. I think that the wrestling business is evolving the way it's going to evolve, and there's going to be new things and new ways of doing things. I don't fault anybody for getting over. I think Cornette is holding on for dear life to the way things were, and it's not going to stay that way. But we can only hope that with companies like NWA and Ring of Honor and AEW that they at least try to bring back some of the good things that you would see in that type of wrestling.
I'm gonna come away from the wrestling now, Mike.
Okay.
I just want to talk about what you do now currently. You help people in recovery. How satisfying is it working and helping people out?
It's great. It's no secret I've had my own personal struggles. And in 2013, I got arrested on drug charges. I was selling some pills to somebody because I was trying to get stronger pills because I was in such a bad way myself. Anyway, as part of my deal, I went through a drug court program, which is kind of like a combination of probation and drug treatment at the same time, but very, very strict. And after I got arrested, I was done. I knew I was done with drugs and everything, and I was willing to do whatever it took. So I got through that program no problem. It was easy because I was willing to change. But as soon as I finished, they asked me to work for them, and I do that now. I work for this. It's called the Adult Recovery Court Program here in Warren County and Van Buren counties in Tennessee. And, I work with a lot of people. Some of them are truly trying to change. Some of them are just trying to get out of jail. But, and sometimes it's frustrating, but sometimes it's very rewarding. And I live for the days where I can help somebody change in a positive way and get away from the drugs and alcohol, hopefully permanently. So it is very rewarding.
It's all about, like you were saying earlier, being accountable, isn't it, for your own actions? Accountability is key.
Yeah, and we have to teach them. We teach a lot of people that it's the world does not revolve around us. We can't just do whatever we want whenever we want to do it. We have to take some responsibility. We have to be held accountable for our actions. And we got to grow up. I remember Vince McMahon once was interviewed because there was a long string of wrestlers that were dying from drug overdoses. And they were asking him if he felt like he had any culpability in that, if any of it was his fault. And Vince McMahon just shook his head and he said, listen, at some point we all had to grow up, and everybody needs to grow up. and a lot of people did not, and they kept living that lifestyle, and it ended badly for them. And I agree with that. It's not Vince's fault, and they took steps in the right direction anyway. They started offering free rehab for guys that used to work for them under contracts. But I truly believe that we all got to grow up. It just takes some of us longer than others, but I eventually got there, and I try to help others get there as well.
Just I've had issues over the years, Mike, and I think you being honest about what happened with you. You've been nothing but honest. So I took a lot from that, your honesty. You know, when I've heard you on shows and stuff.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That was a big part of my recovery, man. Earlier, I tried to get clean a couple of other times, and I tried to hide from it. I tried to hide it all away and not ever tell anybody about it. But the problem with that is I was destined to fall back into that lifestyle. I was trying to hide it, this dirty little secret, and addiction was just waiting for a moment of weakness and for me to mess up. But now, by sharing my story and talking to people about what I've been through, it takes the power away from it in my life. It takes the power of, I'm not just waiting for a moment of weakness anymore and to screw up. I have much more power walking through life. I feel a lot more powerful, and I don't have to live in fear of it anymore, and I don't have to hide from it anymore. I just tell people I'm not embarrassed about it, because I think the opportunity and the chance that I might help other people is a lot more important than my frail little ego sometimes. So it's important to share.
Cool. Right. I want to talk to you about your podcast project, because that's currently coming together. So
we are with my friend Avi Klein, and his original podcast was called Wrestling with Anything But. And I originally went on his podcast, and it was a great experience because it wasn't just a regular wrestling podcast. He's a history teacher by trade, and we had a great interview. And he started talking to me about wanting to possibly do something with me, and I told him my interest. I really wanted to do a podcast based on recovery, and not just from substance abuse and alcohol, but from any tough situation in life. That's kind of what we want to talk about, and it is called Road to Recovery. And it will start on Friday, July 11th, 6 p.m. Eastern time here in the U.S. and 5 p.m. Central time, which is my time, Tennessee. And we will start off on Facebook Live from my private account, Mike Droese. We're going to start there, and it's going to simulcast to Twitch. And eventually we will move over to Twitch. But we are going to just hopefully get folks to subscribe or download the app for Twitch, the free app, and join us for Road to Recovery. It's a very important podcast, talking about tough situations that people have been through in their lives and how they found redemption. Obviously, I know that very, very well. So that is the project we are working on, Road to Recovery, and brought to you by Wrestling with Anything But. And it will start on Friday, July the 11th, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I'll be subscribing. Don't you worry.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I'll be behind it. I'll be in touch about that when it's all rocking and rolling. Right on. Just to close out, can you plug your social media where people can find you? Yeah, just plug your socials, please, Mike.
Yeah, my private account the Facebook account is what really took off with the stories. So it's where everything really kind of is based out of. It's just Mike Droese, and you'll know it when you see it because it's covered with Duke the Dumpster stuff. But that is my Facebook private account, Mike Droese. I also have a Facebook fan page for Duke the Dumpster. It is Duke the Dumpster Official. I also have Instagram, which is also Duke the Dumpster Official. And I have a Twitter page, which has just recently started to take off slowly but surely, called @RealDukeDroese. As a matter of fact, Jerry the King Lawler just responded to one of my tweets yesterday. I was thrilled about that, actually. So, those are my social media outlets. Those are where I'm doing things. But it is all based out of that Facebook private account, Mike Droese. If you really want to see what's going on and the stuff, and I interact with fans there and through Messenger and everything. I always try to make myself available as much as possible.
That's cool, man. My guest for Stu's Wrestling Podcast, Mr. Mike Droese. WWE, WWF, alumni, Duke the Dumpster Droese. I was a big fan, I tell you. Loved it.
Thanks, Stewie. I really appreciate that, brother. It's been a blast being on your show, man.
You can catch Mike with Mr. Harvey Klein. They do a weekly podcast every Friday, and it's called Road to Recovery. Harvey does other podcasts with other wrestlers too during the week, but I'm going to touch upon this one with Mike because he's been on the show. So yeah, Road to Recovery with Duke the Dumpster Droese, Mike Droese, and hosted by Harvey Klein. Superb podcast, and it's on Twitch and it's on Facebook Live at the moment, so make sure you tune into that. A big thank you to Stephen Ash and Ed Dowling for producing the track. It's Stu's Wrestling Podcast, the theme. So thank you very much for that, lads. Much appreciated. Love it. It fits really well, so cheers. Thanks to you. Big thank you to Mike Angus for the show intro, as always. Superb. Chris Dutton, thank you very much for editing once again. Appreciate it, buddy. And also to Lee, who does my website. Lee puts the stuff up on the website. Without you guys, I'd be screwed. So once again, as always, appreciate everything you do for me and the time you spend doing the things you do for me. It means a lot, guys.